The Woman in Black, a ghost story written by Susan Hill, was first published in 1983. It tells the story of a young solicitor who is sent to a remote village to sort out the affairs of a recently deceased client. But he soon realizes that there are some things that money just can't solve. And it's one of those stories where the less you know going into it, the better. So if you're a fan of classic horror and you've never seen this one before, well, do me a favor and don't click away now. Just stick around for another few minutes because I'd like to tell you about the time I went to see the stage play with a friend of mine. It was one of those last-minute things, he said. Do you fancy seeing a show tonight? Tickets are cheap if we book now, and I hate musicals, so I rarely say no when he asks. And this was at the height of the pandemic, too, which meant theaters were operating at half capacity. So we got good seats, and all the hype beforehand had made me expect a thrilling evening. But I have to admit, it didn't quite live up to expectations. It wasn't bad by any means. It was well acted and well written, and there were certainly some jump scares in there. But overall, it just didn't send shivers down my spine like I thought it would. But then again, that's the thing with ghost stories, isn't it? They're often more effective in print than they are on screen. That's why I still prefer watching scary movies alone, even though I secretly wish someone would hold my hand. Anyway, the show finished around 10 p.m. and we caught the tube back home. My friend had a stop at High Street, Kensington, and I had to get off at Lancaster Gate. When the tube pulled into the station, I turned to him and said, well, that was fun. See you next week, but he looked serious. No, I think I'm gonna get off here, he said. Why? I asked, puzzled. I forgot to tell you, he said, but I've just read the story this was based on. The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, and apparently the author wrote that the ghost only appears between 9 and 10 p.m. So I said, oh, come on, but he insisted. And then the doors opened and we stepped onto the platform. When the train had gone, I turned to go, but he grabbed my arm. Don't be silly, he whispered urgently. Stay here with me until the next train comes, and I laughed. But then he looked so sincere that I couldn't help but ask, are you sure it's just the story? And that's when his face drained of color. I don't know, he breathed. Look over there, and I followed his gaze to where a woman stood on the other side of the platform. She was tall and thin, and her long black dress flowed all the way to the floor. She had a white face and long dark hair that hid most of her features, but I could see enough to know she was incredibly sad. And I felt a chill, not because I was suddenly scared, but because I knew without a shadow of a doubt that she was cold. Her fingers were like icicles, and her eyes shone like shards of glass. But there was something else about her, too. Something about the set of her shoulders, the way she walked, the way she held herself. She was dragging herself along the platform as if tied to an invisible anchor, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. We watched her in silence for what felt like an eternity, but it must have only been seconds, because when a train pulled into the station, my friend and I jumped back in surprise. But the moment the carriage doors opened, the woman beckoned. She raised a finger like she wanted to speak to us, and my friend and I exchanged uneasy glances. Should we answer her? We both wanted to run away, but something kept us rooted to the spot. And then the train doors closed and she vanished. So yeah, that happened. And I wouldn't have believed it myself if it hadn't been for the fact that my friend stopped speaking to me for the rest of the journey. As you might have guessed, it turns out that the ghost did appear between 9 and 10 p.m., but it wasn't the ghost of the Woman in Black. Not yet, anyway. Let me start at the beginning. Arthur Kipps is a young solicitor living in London. His boss sends him on a quick trip to the village of Crith in Gifford to sort out the affairs of a recently deceased client, Mrs. Alice Drablow. Arthur arrives in the village and quickly gets to work, but he soon realizes that the villagers are behaving strangely. They're secretive and evasive and clearly uncomfortable with Arthur asking too many questions. They also seem wary of the Eel Marsh house, which is where Mrs. Drablow lived. To make matters worse, the locals refuse to let Arthur stay at the local inn, warning him that there is no room and that he should try somewhere else. So he drives a little further afield and stays at the nearest hotel. And it's while he's staying there that he meets Jeanette Honeychurch, a young woman who's fascinated by the supernatural and who knew Mrs. Drablow from childhood. One night, Arthur is awakened in his hotel room by a knock at the window. He goes to investigate, but there is nothing outside. Then the knocking continues, and after a while, he looks out into the village and notices that every single house is dark except for one. It's the Eel Marsh house. In the morning, Arthur goes to visit the Eel Marsh house and he meets Mrs. Drablow's niece, who confirms that her aunt died in the house the previous evening. The niece wants Arthur to leave as soon as possible, but Arthur is determined to find out what secrets the house is hiding. And the more he digs, the more he realizes that the house is cursed. He learns that for generations, the house has been haunted by the ghost of a woman dressed in black, a woman who seems to wander the village at night, searching for children to take with her. Children, you see, are not safe in this village. Since the beginning of the century, 8 children have died under mysterious circumstances. 4 of them drowned, 3 fell from gables, and 1 died in a fire. And each of these incidents happened at night and under a full moon. At first, the villagers tried to hide these tragedies from outsiders, ashamed that they had lost so many children. But as the years went on and more children died, the villagers became resigned to their fate and eventually stopped trying to hide it. And then Arthur meets Jeanette again, and she tells him that she saw the ghost of the woman in black the night before. She also tells him that the ghost always appears on All Souls' Night when the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest. And she warns him to stay away from Eel Marsh house that night. But again, Arthur is determined to uncover the truth, and he plans to spend All Hallows Eve in the house. On All Hallows Eve, Arthur returns to the Eel Marsh house and barricades himself inside. As darkness falls, he hears the sound of footsteps outside, slow and dragging, and then he sees her. She stands in the moonlight at the end of the garden, and he watches as she walks towards the house. Her dress is black and hangs like a shroud around her. Her face is pale and her hair hides most of her features. But as she draws closer, he can see that she's crying, and then she knocks on the door. Arthur doesn't answer, of course, but the knocking continues, and after a while, he goes to the window to look outside. But the woman is gone. Then the knocking starts again, and this time it's coming from inside the house. Arthur goes downstairs and finds that the front door is wide open. And as he steps outside to close it, he feels something brush against his leg. He looks down and sees a small hand, a child's hand. He follows it and finds the little girl lying dead on the floor. Her name is Flora, and she's the daughter of the caretaker who lives at Eel Marsh house. And as Arthur cradles her lifeless body, he knows that she's not the only one. The ghost of the woman in black takes children, and now she has taken Flora. Arthur is devastated, and in his grief, he lets the villagers take Flora's body away without investigating her death. But he quickly regrets this decision when he finds that the villagers plan to bury her during the day, which would disturb the ghost and bring her back to the house. Arthur tries to stop them, but they ignore him and carry on with the burial. Of course, that night, the ghost of the woman in black returns to the house, and this time she takes Arthur's new friend, Jeanette. Now, realizing that he is responsible for the deaths of these children, Arthur spends his time in the village searching for a way to lift the curse. And he eventually discovers that the ghost is trapped in the house because of an injustice that happened in her lifetime. With the help of the villagers, Arthur sets out to put things right and lay the ghost to rest. But will it be enough to save himself and the remaining children of Crith in Gifford? If you want to find out, then you'll have to read the book or watch the film adaptation starring Daniel Radcliffe. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it didn't give away too much of the plot. If you liked it, please consider subscribing, and until next time, happy haunting!